Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast, where we inspire you to thrive as peculiar people in a modern world. Katie's with me today, as you can see.
Hooray!
And she's here because she loved this book by Tilly Dillehay. It follows the Screwtape Letters frame, but for women. It's a brilliant idea, and she executes it brilliantly.
This book is so rich, you guys. It's a senior demon counseling a younger demon, if you're not familiar with what Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis was like, about how to derail a believer from all the way of like infancy, baby believer stage to like the deathbed. What are all the points and aspects of this person's life that we can get to be far from God and horrible, basically? And so you learn a lot from thinking about the inverse of all of those things. And there were just so many wise and convicting moments and really insightful stuff that I got from this book. And so it's great to be able to talk to Tilly about all this. And Tilly, I don't think, would describe herself as a Torah observant believer. She is a believer who I have learned a lot from. And so I think that this is a great conversation for us all to have and to learn from this book.
It's a good preview of the book, too, because we hop around, Katie reads segments of it, and we touch on many aspects of life, from parenting to prayer to internal monologue and some of her previous work about envy and other things.
Marriage, friendship, sickness, finding a church, like all kinds of things. We go all over the place, so it's a great conversation.
If you're still doing your taxes and you're not already going to GoshenTaxAndConsulting.com in order to get your finances from last year in order, then I don't know what to say to you. Other than, why not allow Kyle Smith, the CPA, and his team help you get more money back on your taxes this year and save you time and stress and headache? Just give it to the man. Give it to the man so that he can sort this out for you so you don't have to stress out about it. And then once you've done that, you could go back to GoshenTaxAndConsulting.com and go to the consultancy aspect of the business. And if you have any kind of online thing that you're selling or trying to promote, whether it's a ministry or you're selling coffee like Shepherd's Crook Coffee, these people can help you improve your online presence in multifold. They do photography even. They do website design, and they do marketing. So they'll help get you in front of more people. Look, they're in front of you right now. So if they can sneak their way in front of you, then why can't they help you sneak your way in front of others? Go to GoshenTaxAndConsultingLLC.com and put in code THELIFE to get 10% off either of these services. So without further ado, we give you Tilly. Tilly, welcome to the Life Podcast. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be with y'all.
I am so excited. I have your book right here, my Dear Hemlock. I am obsessed with it. When I read it, I just was freaking out. I was underlining things on every single page. I was sitting next to Luke on the couch reading the book, and I would just stop him from reading his book to tell him quotes from your book. And it just got absurd. It got to the point where I was like, he could no longer read his book because I was quoting so many things.
Right. Yeah, my husband was doing that to me last night. So interrupting to tell me stuff out of Sense and Sensibility. Yeah. Yeah, he was in a reread, and I guess he was just really digging it last night because I heard a lot about it. It was sweet.
Tell us a little about yourself. Tell us how you were saved and a little about your life, and then we'll get into your book.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So I was raised in a Christian home in the Nashville area. I'm one of 7 kids, and we were all homeschooled in kind of a creative family. My dad was in music for many years, and he was kind of an entrepreneur, and he did a lot of different things later on. But it was definitely a household where we had a lot of time to read and to pursue just random nerdy interests, and hobbies and stuff. So there's a lot of space for that. And so I went to college when I was 16, and it was during a time also when my parents were there was a wobbly time in the family just maritally. They ended up as kind of a flash forward, they ended up getting divorced in 2020 and then remarrying a year and a half later. My husband actually performed the ceremony for my parents getting married in their living room with children and grandchildren watching. This is in like 2021. So this was, there was a bumpy period, I guess I would say, in my family, even though I was raised, I would say, with kind of an idyllic childhood, Christian childhood. So, but in college, I really struggled. I was there really young, and I kind of went off the deep end, I would say. By the time I graduated, I was saying I'm an agnostic. I had an active eating disorder by the time I graduated. I was in a painful period of time. So at some point, my parents sort of confronted me and said, "You seem like you're not doing well." I had lived out of the home. I was back in the home, working. I don't even remember which job I had at that point, but I said, "Yeah, you're right. I am miserable." And they said, "You need to break up with this crazy agnostic boyfriend that you have and go live with our old pastor, who's now a biblical counselor and has offered to let you stay with his family while you counsel with him." So this is, from Nashville to this tiny town that we used to live in called Hartsville, Tennessee, which is where I live now. And it's the smallest county in Tennessee. It's very, very rural. There's a small church here, but it's a very healthy, small church. And so I go out and stay with this family for 2 weeks. I sort of air out all of my grievances with the Lord and all of my, kind of questions that I had. And some of them, I think a lot of it was just, I couldn't understand, why am I still in pain? Why am I struggling so much when I have supposedly been a Christian all these years? And I think what he kind of demonstrated to me from Scripture was just, I had never been obedient to Scripture from the heart. I had paid lip service to something, but my life was a wreck because I had been disobedient, and I had not been following Christ, basically. So by the end of 2 weeks, I was saying, I'm a Christian. I think I've been converted here. And now what should I do? And I ended up deciding to move out here to this little place. Different families in the church hosted me for several years while I was kind of getting my feet under me, worked a few different jobs. But during that time, I also developed a friendship with this pastoral intern who was in the church. And about 2 years after that, we were engaged and then married. So now I'm permanently in a part of this church, and he's now one of the pastors at this very same church. And we have 4 children, 10 and under, who we're homeschooling out here and just living a really, really blessed life. So yeah, that's the short version. But if you've read Hemlock, you know that the very first chapter or 2 kind of tells us a conversion story that's very similar to that. It's probably the most directly autobiographical part of the book. So, yeah.
Wow.
Maybe we should get right into the book then. That seems like a good segue.
Yes.
Can you tell us what inspired you to write this thing? And yeah, I was also curious. I'm sure Katie knows this already, but was this your first book, or had you written many before?
Yeah, well, I had 2 other books before this one. So my first book was published maybe 8 or 9 years ago, called Seeing Green, about envy. Also very, very influenced by and inspired by Lewis's writing, particularly an essay called The Weight of Glory, combined with struggles and thoughts I was having at that time about envying my sister specifically. But that turned it into a project that was about glory, about borrowed glory in other people, and what do you do when you encounter glory in other people. So that was my very first book. And the second one is called Broken Bread. It's about food and just food struggles out of some of the eating disorder stuff I dealt with. And then, this one, very different from either of those books. Both of those are just, straight Christian nonfiction for women type, trade books. And then this was a very, very different kind of project, to the point that I was like, I don't know who on earth would publish a book like this, because it just seems like such a kind of a risky thing to try, because if you do it poorly, I think it's a real bummer. when you try to do an imitation Screwtape letter poorly, it's a very womp womp kind of thing. So
It
Yeah.
seems like you didn't do it poorly. Katie loves it so much. I read some too, but I wasn't able to read the whole thing. But she finished it, loved it. And so it sounds like you succeeded. When did you, can you talk about the moment when you got the idea to do this? When you're like, oh, Screwtape for women.
Yeah.
Or, or whatever you want to.
Yeah. It was just a blog. It was a blog post. Me and my husband used to have a blog together. We would occasionally write stuff for, and I had a piece that I wanted to write that was about women who start to suspect maybe they've married down and that they're just fundamentally higher grade quality material than their husbands. and it was the kind of thing I was like, okay, I feel like I've seen this. I feel like there have been moments I believed this lie, and I want to write about this phenomenon, but it's not the kind of thing you can just shoot off an article for Desiring God about something like, I just couldn't figure out, I couldn't get a handle on how do you write about this. And I needed details that were kind of fictional created details to flesh it out. And I think that's when I decided, what if it was a Screwtape letter? Then you can use fiction to kind of illustrate what you're talking about. And you also get this extra motive from hearing the demon's perspective in this to see how insidious a lie this really is. So it was that was the first post. And that is a letter. It is one of the letters in the final book. And I think I wrote maybe 4 or 5 more blog posts in that voice. Enjoyed developing the voice. That was fun to do this kind of catty female voice, as a counterpoint to Lewis's like Oxford Dawn, Screwtape. So, I did enjoy it, but I also kind of ran out of material that I wanted to address in that voice and put it aside for several years. And I think it was a few years later, my husband suggested, what if you pull this out and write more and finish it out as a book? So that was his idea.
I'm shocked that no one had done it before or done it well before. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I think people have dabbled in it. There's several people who have written. Greg Morse over at Desiring God has a character that he's used repeatedly for articles over there. I know a lot of people have done it, and I think a lot of people get it as a writing assignment in various classes, writing classes and things. So, it does get done, I think. But it is true. It's surprising to me that it's never been done as this sort of female specific project. And that it is the kind of thing where you're like, oh, we should have done this before. This was effective. But one of the dangerous things about, I think, using this device is that it can be a lazy way of making a point that isn't the strongest point in the world on its own. You know what I'm saying? Like it can, because you're saying, oh, look at this thing that I personally hate. Guess what? The demons love it. It's a very, like if you want to just soapbox about a point of yours and add strength to your argument, you can use something like this, and it can be kind of lazy, I think, which is why you have to be careful. I think you have to be careful that what you're trying to say is a true observation and insight into human character, and real, human sin, and that it would be a good point on its own without this device. And then it's safe to use this device, if that makes sense.
This episode of the Life Podcast is sponsored by WholeBibleCommunity.com, a social network for Torah observers. It's for fellowships, it's for individuals, it's for businesses. The idea is to connect them all, give them a place to communicate on the platform. There's a messaging app. There is soon a video communication app. And one of the new features that has been added is a feast day finder. So you can go on there and find public feast days that are being celebrated, Passover, Sukkot, unleavened bread, all these things, where a fellowship or people are hosting something and they're inviting everyone to come. It is made to connect you and also protect you. That's why you don't have to share all your personal details on there. And some new features that Matthew has added, because he heard some of your feedback, is that you can now sign up and you can, instead of just putting in your address or having your location data being turned on, you can just choose a place on the map, anywhere of where you want to put yourself, so that you can be protected and your location can be protected. And then if you're a fellowship, you can, of course, put it right on your third-party location where you meet. so that people can, find it. But for individuals, you can put the pin wherever you want, get past that step, sign up, and find people who are doing the same thing you're doing. Soon there will be this business marketplace where you can find businesses to work with. So the team is constantly working away and they're really improving this. Go to wholebiblecommunity.com and sign up. Add me as a friend.
That's so good. I absolutely felt that when I was reading it. There were so many instances where the conversation between the demon and his mentor described a feeling that I had about my life, my friends, our society that you sometimes don't put a fine point to because you're in it. You're like a fish in water. You don't know you're wet. But describing like something in the parenting chapter that I wanted to read later where you talk about endless threats and bribery and not using your authority as a mom. And you kind of just feel that culture, but no one actually says the thing. And you realize how true it is. And so I think that you did a great job. I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and just talk about the devil, the enemy in general. Because I think that it's easy to think of the devil as either A, a cartoon character, or B, the source of all your pain and troubles. Like it's never God disciplining you. So it's always the devil if something bad happens. It's kind of the impression I got from the church where I went growing up. Or just not consider him at all. So I want to know, how were you raised to think about the enemy in your Christian home? And did writing this book change anything about how you conceive of him or think a believer needs to interact with the idea of like Satan or the person rather?
That's a great question. I've always been, we were in a few different church settings, I guess, when I was real small. But since I can remember, we've been basically in Reformed-ish circles, Presbyterian or Baptist, but Reformed, or non-denom, but Reformed. So I think personally what I've seen in those circles is less of an emphasis on the work of on the spiritual life, maybe, or just definitely less of an emphasis on Satan and his devices, because we don't want to fall into the ditch of saying the devil made me do it, or seeing a devil under every rock or whatever. So, but I would say because of that, I have tended to have a pretty underdeveloped idea of, well, what is Satan actually up to? What is he actually doing that touches my real life? And I think, working on this project was something that made me a lot more likely to ask in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, what would God like to see in my heart at this moment as a response to this thing that's happening right now? And what is Satan? What would he like to see? What is he trying to do here? I'm assuming that he's active. I'm assuming that he's prowling. So what is he actually doing? And not as a way of offloading any sense of responsibility for my own sin at all, but just being much more aware that the enemy is alive and well, and that's real. It's not a flight of fancy. So yeah, I think it's made me more likely to touch that thought throughout as the day goes on. What is going on? What is the potential battle right here on this weekday?
Yes, that's so good, because you do hope as a Christian you have the thought, what does God want me to do right now? But sometimes when you are tempted to stray or rebel, and you think of it as your own thing and your own decision, your own agency, rather than something that could actually be helping the enemy's agenda in your life. So
Right.
It's just an important realization. How did you get in the headspace to write this book? Did it ever make you feel weird to be thinking like a demon all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. So they say that Lewis had a hard time writing through his book because I think he sat down and wrote it all in a shorter period of time and got done and was ready to be out of the voice. Very, very tired of being in there. I wrote this in like little snatches, little bites almost, so it was like a letter here, a letter a few weeks later, and then as you heard, a year without any of it. So I feel like I never had that overwhelming feeling of, oh, that's too much hoax-rot, until I was reading the audiobook. And reading the audiobook for 2 weeks or so in the evenings in my closet over here, that was the first time I felt like, okay, when I was done, I was really done. I was like, I've got to get out of this voice. So yeah. And
That makes sense.
honestly, yeah, it was something. I remember getting a lot of notes from the editor, and especially in the first draft, of just having slipped into just normal Christianese talk where I forgot and flipped back, So
Not
yeah.
evil enough to
right. The note. I think he probably wrote 60 times in the margin. Would a demon say this? So it got to be a joke. Would a demon say this? I don't know.
That's so funny. It's not what would Jesus do. It's what would demons say.
This is too pure of an expression.
Yeah, right. This is too true.
Default, that's what's coming out. It's better that that's what's coming out than that it's so readily, I guess, easy to be this demon. But okay, I want to read a quote.
Okay,
this is something that really stood out to me, and it was about loving the idea of being godly, or the idea of being holy, or the idea of growing more than God Himself. So I just want to read it so you can hear this a little bit. It says about the woman, the patient, even her highest affections are not so high. She loves not holiness itself, but the idea of holiness. She loves the idea of becoming more respectable, more knowledgeable, more fruitful, more righteous. It's a love of progress, of dignity, of potential, of growth. She still rarely fixes her thoughts on Him. At her best, she is engrossed with the idea of herself being more engrossed with Him. And when I read that, I was like, oh, can you talk about that?
Yeah. Just asking yourself, and this is I feel like this is just a checker that I feel like I go through this on a pretty cyclical basis of just being in the midst of a season of, motherhood and ministry and work of all kinds, and just pulling back and being like, okay, if my heart was a pie chart of affections and desires, what is it that's on my mind for most of the day? And even, and just recognizing, like, even at my very best, even in those, oh, how holy I feel right now, wonderful, like, devotion time moments, there's still always a piece of impurity in there, of you thinking, what I'm wanting right now is to be thinking of myself as a person who's in love with God, rather than being a person who's in love with God, if that makes sense. And just, I guess, learning to live with that knowledge, like to live with the idea of there's always going to be an impurity in your worship, even until the next age, but that the Lord even accepts our worship. And even in that knowledge, that the Lord still accepts what is there. That's an amazing part. But I do think trying to picture that pie chart in a day when I realize I am completely engrossed in thoughts of, what do people think about me today? Or I'm completely engrossed in thoughts of, I don't know, just different kinds of ambition even, or, does my husband love me enough today? Do my children care and obey well enough today? This, how much of my heart is a true desire to see Christ and to gaze on Him? And I want that pie chart to change as the years go by, but I don't know. I think it's just something to kind of pull back and reassess every now and then. What do you love?
Seems like in order to write the book, you have to be so open and self-aware in order to make it real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But it sounds like your other two writing projects were similar.
Yeah. I think that first book about envy is so ugly, and there's a lot of, like, personal stories in that book, to the point that when I got done, I felt like I had to put something in the postscript to apologize for the ugly flashes of like, nasty human heart, I guess, that you see. And I do feel like I have to be careful in my writing, because I do tend to err on the side of just exposure, and because I don't have time for not going straight to the heart of something. I don't know how sometimes it frustrates me in Christian writing that I feel like you get to a point in your Christian life when you can't admit to real sin anymore. You're reading like a Christian counseling book, and the writer says, a few weeks ago I was cut off in traffic, and I really thought about being angry for a minute, and you're like, okay, is this like confession mode for you? Like, are we meant to believe like this was the deep, difficult thing that you dealt with this week? But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense. I don't have time for writing that isn't honest.
Because, that writing's fake and it's not helpful. But writing
Right.
that's real and exposes who you are, that's the best nonfiction writing, and that's helpful to people.
Yeah.
So,
Right. And
yes, thank you for being honest.
And so, on this same point of loving the idea of holiness perhaps more than God itself, or the idea of seeing yourself make progress more than being like him. Like, I was washing dishes the other day just praying, and I was thinking, the moments, women, a lot of women that I know, myself included, have these self-improvement projects on the list. I need to be more like this, more like that, better mom, more discipline, more exercise, better quiet time, et cetera, et cetera. And I felt like God was like, a lot of these prayers of the consistency that you want, the perfection that you're after, are not being answered because it's for your own glory. And it's like, do you want to be that way because I, the person you love the most, am perfectly that way, and you want to be a reflection of me, you want others to experience him? Or do you want to be these ways because you want to look great?
Right.
And it just was like a sobering, thing. We want, as believers, people to experience the presence of God when they're around us. Like, that would be ideal, right? I mean, even just when you come to the Bible for your own personal reading time, I've sometimes checked myself. Am I digging in because I'm looking for what I should do next? Or am I looking at the character of, like, the God I serve? Am I looking for him? Am I looking for my next, like, couple steps, So this bit
But
really,
he's
hit
so
home.
kind to us, isn't he? He's so kind and gentle to keep pulling us and leading us along, and
Yeah.
and we're so blind for so long, to all of the real motives in there. But he's kind. He's pulling out what's good, and he's growing it, and he's making it. It's just it's wonderful to not be in charge of your own development.
So one of the things that really struck me in this book, just like when I read Screwtape Letters years back, was how much of the lore goes on inside the mind of the patient. It's like, encourage her to think this, encourage her to assess this situation this way. How much of our spiritual battle is in our heads, do you think?
Well, I think there's a pretty good case to be made for the think right, do right, that where your head is, that's where the rest of you is gonna go. Yeah, I mean, we believe lies first. That's where everything begins. Is there's a lie that we kind of accept, and then we begin to operate out of that lie, and that tends to produce more confusion. We know that sin makes us stupider, and obedience tends to clarify and make us smarter. Which is one of the things that I was trying to kind of demonstrate and explore a little bit in different areas of this book, is the idea of like the demons themselves being confused. They have a lot of clarity when it comes to the human heart being not what it thinks it is or whatever, but the demons themselves are not self-aware, and that there's got to be some disorientation as a result of them being in rebellion, because we know that's what happens with a human, that when the more rebellious you are, the more disoriented you are, and the more confused you are. So I have to believe that that's true on some level for the demons. But I can't remember where I started with this question. Where did we begin? Just that more disobedience causes more mental confusion, and mental confusion causes more disobedience. So that's the kind of cycle. And then I think the same is true of acts of obedience. When you act obediently because this is what you were told to do, you tend to get more clarity on the backside. Even if it's something that you're like, I don't really know why the Lord says this is how it has to be, but he said that this is how it has to be. So I'm going to walk this way. And clarity sometimes comes later through the obedience.
Wow, that's so good.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's like God's not a God of confusion.
He has a plan for us, and it's good.
Yeah, so good.
Yes.
It's true. That would have to be true, you know? Okay, in what ways do you think that believers today are just doing the enemy's job for him? And he doesn't even need to like derail our spiritual lives because we're already doing it.
I mean, I have to assume he's all mixed up in it, that he's helping out with that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I see a lot of things that I'm just like, come on, guys, like we're supposed to be on the same team here. Why are you out there lying? Why are you out there lying? Just, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's true that we're willing participants in a lot of what Satan is doing, and in our own lives too, because sin is real. But yeah.
Yeah, if we could only be perfect all the time, it would be great.
Oh, okay. I have another quote. This is one I probably read to Luke 10 times. I also got my mom to read this book, by the way, and she loved it. And I told all of the girls at our house church.
Good.
Okay. So there's a passage where basically it's talking about having people overcomplicate their troubles and not just do the simple answer. And this sentence, which I think is one of the best sentences ever written, says, "The humans are all Naamans, certain that their problems are too unique and too naughty for a simple swim in the Jordan." Can you talk about that passage in the Bible in case anyone's foggy on it and what the idea behind this part was?
Yeah. So the classic story about Naaman, who's got leprosy, and he's told by the prophet to go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and he immediately is resistant to the idea because he thinks there's no way that could be it. After all these years of sickness, after all this, I came all this way to speak to you. You're not even going to speak to me. You're just going to send me to go do this simple thing in the Jordan. And so he doesn't want to do it. And I see this as a very common kind of human tendency, is that if someone, all of our relationship issues, and this, I think that was in the chapter about newlyweds, maybe just, and rudeness and discourtesy, that rudeness often turns to hatred in the home with those that we live with. If you continue to be rude and not treat the other people that you live with the way that you would almost anyone else who walked into your home, it registers as just a lack of courtesy, but eventually those things do grow into positive hatred. And that's what the demon is telling Hemlock, is like, you need to work on this kind of thing, because these small spats left undealt with and unrepented of, this is the kind of thing that leads to a total bust up of a relationship, even, or just years of resentment. So, but you tell a person, okay, why don't we go back to the basics of saying please and thank you and greeting each other when you come home at the end of the day and saying thank you. Basic things that sound very simple. A woman who's already frustrated in her marriage is going to think, no, that's much too simple. What we need is to go to therapy, or we need, like he needs to get a better job, or whatever it is she's got in her mind as this is the solution. Sometimes it's a lot simpler than we think. It's simple acts of obedience a lot of the time. And we want to complicate things that don't need to be complicated.
No.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, man. Okay, here's another one. So the other interesting thing about this book is that temptation's not always this big, grandiose moment. It's very small, ordinary kind of things, like being rude to the people in your home and stuff like that. So why do you think ordinary distractions, or even like phones or busyness or media, like these sorts of distractions and things can be more dangerous spiritually than like big, obvious sins sometimes?
This was definitely something that you saw in the Screwtape Letters book as well, that Lewis was very faithful to not go off on big scale items like war or just some of the things we would like. He's in the middle, he's writing in the middle of, I think, World War II, and he's careful to not get off into, let's talk about these larger scale political issues or whatever, except as it touches on the patient. And instead, he sticks with the normal, everyday temptations, the small decisions that we make all throughout our days, and how that can turn the whole ship. That can turn the ship of one life, which can turn the ship of many other lives. And I've been, interested in this kind of thing for a long time, even the idea of just womanhood and how a woman who's in her home, whether she's a happy and contented woman loving her role, how many lives she touches in that. And also what are the ricochet effects of a woman who has decided to reject that role and reject contentment in the Lord and just constantly fret like that you would say this is a domestic thing, like it's a woman, how she behaves in her house. Like, what could be more private than that? What could be more small scale than that? But that's the kind of thing that turns a nation. Like, on the larger scale, that affects the course of every child in that home, how their life, where they go. Like, it touches everything. The decision that you make in your heart this morning to sing and be cheerful and obey affects generations. And that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in women understanding, I think, is how large scale their daily decisions are.
This podcast is also sponsored by the Life Network, or TLN, as I like to call it. You can check out what we're doing there at watchthelife.com. We're making a matchmaking show that hooks up Torah observant singles so that they can have a family. We're touring Torah observant homesteads so that you homesteaders can learn the best practices from the best people that we can find. We're hosting a women's talk show where Katie discusses common Torah problems, joys, issues, trials, tribulations, all on camera, all for your benefit. And we have more stuff coming. So if you want to find out more about that, go to watchthelife.com and join us, baby. We're revolutionizing entertainment, and we're doing it in a biblically clean way. This is Netflix for Torah. Go to watchthelife.com.
Yes, it's easy to lose sight of that. I always think about the Garden of Eden, and I'm like, that was a snack. It was like the fall of mankind. I think there's a Christian song I remember hearing like on Christian radio growing up. And the chorus is, remind me of this with every decision. Generations will reap what I sow. I can pass on a curse or blessing to those I may never know. And like, that probably seemed like a super small moment to Eve, but then whoa, And actually what you're saying about womanhood was another interesting theme. There's a chapter in the book about raising a strong woman, and a really beautiful passage about the power of like biblical femininity and like female softness, for lack of a better way of saying it, and what that can do. And it just made me think, can you talk about radical feminism and trying to make women into battering rams, and perhaps the power that women have in that softness that we're missing right now?
Yeah. So the demon in that chapter, well, let me go back. Actually, I was retelling a story of something that actually happened the day that I found out I was pregnant with a daughter instead of a son, with my first baby. We went and got the ultrasound, and after that ultrasound, I was walking around in a mall, and I just still remember the thoughts that were kind of racing, as I was picturing this girl and just thinking into the future immediately with anxiety and thinking, okay, we're gonna have to worry about eating disorders. We're gonna have to worry about men. We're gonna have to worry about, confidence. And I just immediately was off on this kind of trail of, here's all the stuff that comes with being a woman, and here's what's hard about it, and what that whole chapter is about is different kinds of feminine strength. And the demon is saying, we don't mind if this woman decides to raise her daughter to be a strong woman, as long as the kind of strength that she means is brittle resolve to make sure she avoids pain at all costs. So as long as the strength involved is her resolve to say, no matter what, I will never allow this bad thing to happen. So that could mean I will never let anyone take advantage of me. And so I'm going to abandon my husband and children because this is what I need for me right now. It could mean I'll never darken the doors of a church again because I was hurt in a church, so I'm not going to let that happen. It could mean I'm going to do whatever it takes to pursue, physical health, even if that means neglecting any other responsibility or whatever. So it's like this is all a kind of strength. It's a kind of resolve, and it's the kind of resolve that we all know women who have carried resolve that is unbelievably powerful into their deathbed. It's like they've held this for a lifetime. So it's not that it's not strength. It is strength of a kind. But the demon says this is a kind of strength that is not dangerous to us at all. Let her build her own armor against painful things. And what that armor is actually just bitterness. That's what it is. He says, but the enemy, God, would build another kind of armor for her. And then it kind of walks through the armor laid out in Scripture and says he would give her a living spine that is flexible and behaves more like a vine that grows up and pushes things forward, or a living stream that can cut through rock, but in this very fluid way. And we don't know how this works, the whole feminine strength of softness, but we know that it's incredibly dangerous to our forces. And it doesn't work the same way as your more traditional weapon, the battering ram. You mentioned the battering ram a second ago. So just, in other words, feminine strength that is godly is incredibly dangerous to the enemy, but it's more of a living, fluid, flexible strength that chooses to trust God in every circumstance and understands that pain will come and that she's not going to be able to avoid pain, and that's not the main point. That's not the main goal. The point is that she is trusting in Christ, and he grows her into a very formidable warrior. But it's a soft war that she wages. It's a very different kind of war. So,
yeah, that passage was really beautiful, just talking about how that war is waged in small choices, like deciding to say a prayer for your husband or something when you could have just tried to push forward and correct something that you think is wrong, or it just gave great examples of that soft war, and I thought that was really compelling and beautiful and a good reminder. It's in our culture, you see a lot of the more battering ram type
right.
traits
Right.
praised and stuff.
Yes, and I've been back on social media the last 3 or 4 months to talk about this marriage stuff that I've been working on, and being back on, it's really jarring to see the ways that women are counseling each other online that I've been kind of out of touch with for a while, and just to see how much of the advice that we give each other is advice about how to demand our rights with other people, which is completely contra to what we find in Scripture for just Christians in general, but certainly contra to what a true feminine strength actually looks like. But it's very insidious, the way that women talk to each other on the way that women advise each other on Instagram is it makes me very angry, actually, when I'm on, because I'm just I know some of the women who are believing this, and I know what the fruit looks like in her children's lives, and it's hard not to be angry and grieved.
This is the hard thing about social media or the news in general now. It's hard not to get wrapped up in that and let it make you angry. And man, that's a totally different thing. But what are you going to do? Are you going to stay on social media or just as long as you need to, and then you're going to pull the plug? Or do you think that we should stay in there and try and infuse wisdom into the conversation?
Right. Yeah, this is a conversation I've been having with my podcast partner for over the past 5 years on and off, because I've been very anti, especially Instagram, because I feel like as a young mom, that was the thing that stole more time from me than any other app or whatever. Like it was the thing that I felt like, okay, this is a true theft of time here and attention from my toddlers who need my eyes. And they're having a very different experience of childhood than I had because my eyes are on this thing. So that's when I got off. And I think since then, though, my friend Abigail, who does the podcast with me, she's very effective on social media, and she's had a very clear, I think, message and way of communicating that message on several different of the platforms. And I think it's been a fun kind of back and forth with us, of me being like, just for all the other women out there, if you don't know exactly what your message is and have a really clear view of that message actually working and being effective with a group of people, I think you should stay off, especially while you have young children, because I think we fool ourselves a little bit about what we're really doing on there and whether it's actually a tool in our hand or an addiction that we're just living with, So I tend to be pretty pessimistic about things like Instagram in terms of, especially moms of young children, how useful it actually is and whether you actually are doing what you think you're doing on there mission wise. So yeah, the answer, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to stand it. But we'll see.
That sounds exactly like the friendship chapter. Maybe we should talk about this next, because there's a chapter
Okay.
about wine night and
Oh,
the group of friends who you think, oh, well, I'm a witness here. I'm the only Christian they know. I
right.
have to stay in the
Yes.
gate because I'm going to show what Jesus is like to them. But in reality,
Mhm.
you just ended up laughing at the slightly inappropriate joke or compromising. You might not be saying much of anything, and maybe you're the one being influenced. Do you think that's a similar thing as what's happening with social media?
Yeah, I think that's a great connection to make. Just that it's like, okay, how clear is your mission, and can you assess yourself to say, okay, who's really doing the influencing here? Which direction is this influence actually running? And in that chapter, it was a group of worldly ladies that she knew maybe from college. They weren't on mission together. She wasn't being asked to come in and like do a Bible study with someone who was genuinely curious or interested. She was just being led into a worldly circle of people, and she was changing her behavior depending on who she was with. It was making her feel kind of better about herself in both the church circle and the worldly circle. Which was a direct borrowed idea from Screwtape, where he's deciding who are his people, and when he goes back and forth between them, this group makes him feel more kind of sophisticated than his church friends, and this group makes him feel holier than his worldly friends, and so he kind of goes back and forth and enjoys being plumped up a little bit on both sides, and really he just needs to go all in with his new people. So, yeah, I think to connect that with the social media, I think is a great thought. And one of the questions to ask is just like, how much time am I willing to have given to this? Like when I look back on these 10 years of raising young kids, how much would be too much in my mind? And is that what's happening? And if I think I'm going to stop that from happening, what am I going to do different so that that's not going to be happening? That it's going to be stealing multiple years of my life from me, because that's genuinely what it's capable of doing.
So if somebody is in this situation currently, either with social media or perhaps with a group of friends, and they think, oh, I have to stay here because I'm a witness, what are some things that they can ask themselves to start that reflection process and figure out, am I influencing or being influenced? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I think the first question is like, what are my goals in this interaction? Okay, I'm going out to dinner with my old college friends, say. How do I picture this going? What are the specific areas of life that I'd like to press into talking about or whatever? And then doing a kind of post-game analysis and saying, is that what is actually happening when I do get together with this group? Do I accomplish what I hoped to? Because maybe she does, maybe she is actually a person they look up to the degree that she's actually moving the ball somewhere when she's with them. And even then I would still say these can't be your first circle of friends, because you choose your close companions more carefully than that. But can you give time to people that you're trying to influence? Of course, I have unbelievers in my home for supper, and that's an intentional decision, to have to be around unbelievers so you can share the gospel. So obviously we're not separatists, but I think you have to keep a real close watch on what are your goals, and then are they actually happening? So hopefully that helps.
That's very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you have to eventually you have your circle of friends who can support you in your faith. And then you can branch out and you can help disciple and mentor people. I think that is the best way. And then if they're you're just your close group of friends and they are the atheist agnostics and they're funny and whatever, it's not helpful. It will draw you in. You're right.
Right. This can't be your closest people. And I can think of relationships from back before that I held on to for a while. And there's a point now where it's like, I don't have space in life to spend time with this person, and they don't have any interest, in learning or growing, and we might see each other at a wedding, or we might see each other, bump into each other or whatever, but I'm not making space in time for this person or this group of people because I have other responsibilities. So yeah, it's a matter of care, I guess.
To quietly fire them as your friend. or overtly fire them. It just depends on the situation.
Or you gotta have that DTR thing. Yeah.
Yes. Define the relationship.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. We can't just slink quietly into the shadows. We have to tell them, or can we just cut them silently?
Yeah.
Katie wants to slink into the shadows.
Yeah, that would be my preference too.
Oh, goodness. Okay. We were talking about the social media and the parenting. And so there was a passage in the parenting chapter that I mentioned earlier that rang so true. Do you mind if I read your own book back to you again? I want everyone to hear this bit. That's okay.
It's all right. It helps me remember what was in there. It's been a while.
So earlier in the chapter, you talk about how the enemy is trying to get believers, I guess, to not have authority in their home as parents that the scripture lays out. And then it just sort of unravels everything into an experience that the mother cannot enjoy and that the children are not benefiting from. So it says, she will become increasingly shocked at the sheer amount of trouble or work required of her. Over time, resentment will grow. She will soon find that she prefers to ignore her children and look at her phone, or to make one more threat and then another. This, of course, will make things harder for her the next time around. And this is the sentence that was like haunting. She'll fall into a settled habit of giving meaningless commands, helpless vindictive speeches, wordy diatribes against bad attitudes. Her words will become cheaper, and little ears will get more deaf. It's a perfect cycle of frustration. And then on the next page, you talk about how children whose parents have abdicated responsibility live in this totally amorphous and formless world that's quite frightening because they don't have boundaries and structure. They're having to construct their morals on their own. Yeah. Will you share more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard to decide. I mean, you can see with a book like this where there's so many topics, and you're trying to kind of touch many different things, but it came to parenting and like, okay, there needs to be at least one chapter that's entirely about parenting. What's the one burning thing that I feel like we need to say about parenting in this season of history? And I felt like what we're struggling with as a group is authority. Like that's the thing that we're not understanding, is how much of a gift authority structure is to our children. And yeah, the demon talking through, actually the little human creatures need a sense of authority in order to feel secure and safe, and in order for the parent to have the kind of enjoyment in the home that leads to lasting relationship, with the kids. And those are all things that I've observed, but also experienced. I'm not a person who loved the mantle of authority when it came onto my shoulders as a young mom. Like, I don't want to be the boss. I don't enjoy being the boss particularly, but there's a moment as a mom when you have to recognize I have to learn this role in order to love these children well. And I would love to just avoid conflict with them at all the time. And that was possible with just maybe one child. It was possible to do whatever they wanted all the time. And that was I think that was my ditch with the first two children, was not setting up enough authority with just my one firstborn, because it was so easy to just do kind of whatever we felt like, and whatever she got to make a lot of the decisions, I think, at an early age. And if I could go back, that would be something I would do differently, because by the time number two comes along, you've got that habit in place and you realize, well, now I'd be happy to do what either of these children want, but they want different things now. And neither of them are used to giving way just because, which was the kind of thing you have to practice with your children, being like, no, this is the cup that I'm going to give you to drink water out of because I said this is the cup. Even though I don't care about the cup. The point is, we have to learn what authority feels like, and there's no path to peace in the home without taking up the mantle of authority, of loving authority with your kids. And as a mom, I think especially that can be really hard to learn if it doesn't feel natural to you. So, and of course there are other ditches. Right.
This is a huge one. This is,
Yeah.
And plus you're getting bad advice from the world telling you not to discipline
Yes.
your children.
Yeah.
And that it's evil and wrong, and it will
Like just
crush their
parenting.
spirits.
Mhm.
Right. Just
And
let them sit in the fields. Just leave that poor toddler alone in their tantrum.
When they,
Yeah. It just,
I saw a video of a woman being struck in the face by her toddler, and then just taking a breath and calmly holding the child like they're dysregulated. It was shocking.
yeah.
And being
those are
praised for
we're
that
talking about being
response.
angry on Instagram. That is
Yeah.
one of the things that's been the hardest for me, to just be like, I want to get on here and just let them have it, it just is, it's so frustrating, yeah, the feeling. But I think that was why, given one shot in that chapter, let's talk about parenting with one issue to address. It felt like this is the issue of the moment. And if it was 50 years ago, it would probably be a different issue that would need to be addressed, but it felt like this is the burning problem for our generation of parents, is we don't understand the value of authority.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I guess I thought about, just as a woman and talking to different ladies and stuff, being conflict averse in terms of your relationships with other adults. But I never thought about how it mapped onto your parenting and how that can actually be a big problem.
Yeah.
You just hadn't
Right.
applied it there. But the
Right, you're just
authority
trying to
is
keep
what-
the peace with this toddler.
Right.
And so there are ways of working around giving them a direct command that allows you to not face the fact that they're disobeying, And so if you never give a direct command, then you never have disobedience and you never have the appearance of conflict. But what you're actually doing is avoiding conflict that needs to take place, which would bring peace on the other side, and creating chaos instead, And that's a woman. I mean, I know men can do it too, but it's just women are with those children all day, and we have to get this to create true peace.
Yes, that was one part I noticed in that passage that she wrote, that the only path, like you just said, is creating the authority, and then things get easier after you you get over the hump, and then
Yes.
things get easier, and it's like, it's
Yes.
still not perfect, but at least it's easier, and now they can be a joy to be around.
Right, and you don't have to be miserable with them all the time.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson's advice is, don't let your kids do something that makes you hate them, something like that. I'm probably butchering it, but it's
Yeah.
that's the idea.
Enjoy them. You love them most. If you don't enjoy them, then what hope do they have in the rest of the world? It's
I know.
it's really important. And
Yeah.
they're supposed to be a blessing. That's what the Bible says. And children are a blessing. So
Yeah.
What if there's a parent, a mom or dad who's listening and they're like, I do this. I
Mhm.
don't give direct commands to my kids. I let them have a billion choices. I avoid conflict. Are there any small things they can just start doing, like, today that could help turn the
Yeah.
tide in their house?
Yeah, so I found it really helpful, and you do these things where you realize I wouldn't have understood to do this with the first child because I didn't have the imagination to see what this would turn into later on, this particular problem. So I feel like with my fourth, it's just been so much easier to see through, to kind of cut through the 2-year-old nonsense. But and she's our happiest. Honestly, it's our happiest time with a 2-year-old in the house. She's a delight. But we did start pretty young with her, just doing little obedience exercises. And I did do the thing where you sit them on your lap and you ask them not to touch something, and they have to sit on your lap and not touch the thing that's there that they want to touch. Little exercises like that I found really helpful because I just found it easier to do that when I was in a great mood. They were in a great mood. Everybody's kind of well slept, well fed. Get out of head and set expectations like that in a good moment instead of having to just react when you're already kind of in the middle of a hard moment. Um, I will recommend a couple of books that were helpful to us because I think I thought I understood this better than I did early on, and I should have been more humble to ask for more input and more advice from parents who I really respected. And I felt like I needed to already know everything. So going after the parents that you see who are doing this well and just humbling yourself to say, look, I'm really struggling in these areas. What would you do? Because often they do see what you're doing and they probably do have an opinion about it. And it's hard to hear that opinion. But really good, really good. If you can be humble enough to ask for input, it's great because there are people with more experience than you. I know a lot of people are familiar with Wilson's material, parenting material, but I actually found 2 books to be the most practical that are sort of in that orbit, but not. There's this book called 8 Errors Parents Make, I believe, by Michael Brock, that I thought was maybe the most short, practical, like toddler training book that I've seen. As far as just like assume that I'm an idiot and tell me what to do if I don't have any idea, and my instincts are all bad. I thought that was a really helpful book. Also, there's a book called Purposeful and Persistent Parenting that has blue tape on the front that is similarly practical and a little bit longer and also addresses different stages, not just toddlers. So those are two that I've been handing to parents.
That's great.
Oh man, that's perfect. Yeah, maybe we can even link to those.
Mm-hmm.
You said different stages, and it just reminded me of something else that I liked about this book, which is I told Luke this morning, it's kind of like a country song where you go from the beginning of something all the way to like the deathbed in one package. And
Yeah,
that's what's
like a
really
country
powerful.
song.
It's not just a book for a new believer or a young mother or a newlywed, it goes all the way to the patient's deathbed. And so I wondered, how were you able to conceive of what's going through the patient's head in these different scenarios, in scenarios that you have not yet been in and
Mm.
stuff? Like, what did you draw from to write about her, sort of the end part of her life?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I do think that it's sort of more front loaded on the earlier years. Like there's more of the book where she's kind of still pretty immature, I would say, and maybe 3/4 of the way through or a little later, you start to see victory and maturity show up, in the stories. But the bringing her all the way to the deathbed was a really deliberate decision to try to mirror the structure of Screwtape, where you do get to see victory, the real victory in his death at the end, and then deciding how the patient was to die. I thought Screwtape's patient dies in an air raid in London, which is something people are afraid of in that season because it's wartime. And I thought, what are women afraid of? Like, what's the kind of death that we're the most scared of, or what that we picture? And I just feel like middle-aged cancer is kind of one of those things that we all kind of have floating in our minds as, what if? And then add to that several saints, maybe 3 or 4 women in our church who are some of the pillars of our community. We've lost to a few different things. A COVID death in 2020 of the pastor's wife, and a few other dear, dear women who I've had the privilege to watch them walk through the valley of the shadow of death in the last 4 or 5 years. And I did talk to some of the children of these women before writing those chapters. But I was trying to show the beauty and the victory of death, and how lovely and instructive it is to view the death of his saints, and also how she becomes unreachable and untouchable to the forces of evil by the end, and because I thought that was one of the redeeming moments of Screwtape, and I thought we needed this sort of modern day feminine version of that. So,
yeah, I found that part powerful. I think you reference, like, we sing in Psalms and stuff, and quote the verse, "Death, where is your sting?"
mhm,
In reality, a lot of people are very afraid of it. It can be a
right.
very frightening thing. So when you actually are faced with that, can you live in that? It's almost like a superpower to not be afraid of death. Death is like the thing
Yes.
that, apart from
Yes.
God, we should be terrified about, so I
Right, which
thought
is
that was,
one of the effects, I think, of watching saints die, is that it does remove some of the fear of death as you go along. And I do think the mature Christians that I know, they're not scared to go to the deathbed like young people are. Young people are afraid of even facing it, being in the room there. What do you say? The kind of thing that you're scared of going to a funeral when you've never lost anyone, I think. But it's like most suffering. Like, once you've experienced some suffering, it makes suffering less fearful, not more. If you're walking by faith, I think it removes the fear more than anything else. So, yeah, I know, I totally agree with what you're saying there.
oh man, that just loops back to the thing about the strong women. Sorry, everything connects to
Mm,
everything. But you said it's kind of to make your strength be about avoiding pain.
mhm.
That's not, you know, it's not what we're promised as believers, and it's not what's best for us necessarily. Like, how are we going to be formed? And you're saying it sounds like it'll create more fear
It's
because
fear, yeah.
that we're
Right,
afraid of, and then it's
right.
bigger in our heads because we've never been through it. So then we're just even more afraid of death or somebody hurting us or things like that. And I think
Mhm.
that surrendering to God and having that willingness to trust Him and actually obey Him and follow, even when you're not sure, is like massive power and peace, that we
Yes.
can have. So
Yes.
it's so cool how it all just ties together. Let's see. Okay, there was one more major thing that I really liked and wanted to talk about, if we have a moment for it. And it is a passage about, or the section about prayer. I thought that it highlighted the fact that in our parents' and maybe grandparents' generation of believers, there was this simple, faithful, say your prayers kind of culture. I know when I've said it, I know when I haven't yet, I know when I'm going to say it. And in our culture, it's become this thing we've romanticized so much we can't even get started.
Mm.
Um, what do you think has changed about how believers approach prayer now from maybe our parents or grandparents?
Yeah, I think we don't think of it as a discipline that is really straightforward, and that it's okay to not be feeling a lot of the feels or whatever when you're praying, because that's not necessarily what the purpose of prayer is and what the goal of prayer is. So yeah, I think there's a generational issue of us not praying enough because we have really um, weird expectations for what prayer is or what we're going to get out of it. Um, and so just the idea of like learning to be someone who just shows up to a prayer meeting on Wednesday nights and prays when you're tired with a group of women, or who gets up in the morning and reads through a prayer has passages maybe of scripture that you pray over and over again for different believers. Just being willing, or just saying the Lord's Prayer, as using that on a regular basis in your prayer time. Just it's okay for it not to be the most creative thing in the world, because you're a human being, and showing up to pray is the biggest deal, is the biggest part of it. Just doing it is how you grow in it. So yeah, I think that was just being willing to kind of simplify what your goals are, so that you're more likely to faithfully pray. All the women that I know who are faithful in prayer and have been for years and years, they all have some kind of very simple written system where there's like a book that they pick up, they've written the requests in, or whatever. They all have a routine that's not fancy, but it's faithful. So,
Have you developed one of those out of curiosity?
yeah, so I have I've just I've just changed the system, actually, in the last 2 months, because I was given this really lovely book that came out of Crossway, put together by someone named Lois Krogh, and it's just a prayer journal. But she came to our church and did a little women's retreat to show us how to use it. And it's not like you need a system exactly like this, but I like this system because it's a book where you have maybe 5 different categories: believers that missionaries, a section where you just pray the gospel to yourself, and then a section for each member of your family and yourself. And then you are writing a verse or two of scripture in each of these sections to pray over those people. So, and then she uses the thing that's different about it is there's Post-it note, a spot to put Post-it notes, because things change, like the request changes, or even the people change. Like you're trying to pray for your little kids in your Sunday school class, and then the year changes over and those kids are gone, and you want to be able to switch that over and say, okay, now I'm going to pray for just the people who are actually in my life, in my sphere of influence. So anyway, that's a kind of a long blurb, I guess, for that little book that I've enjoyed. But yeah, my big thing right now is I'm a mother with children, so I have to find a time that I know is going to be the time. And for me, it's 6:15. If I don't get up by 6:15, it's over. It's not going to happen. So that's kind of my outer limit. And I only get 20 minutes maybe to pray and to read. So that means I have to have a system where I know I don't have to think about it. I don't have to be like, what am I praying for today? I can just go to my little book and open it and maybe just do one of the sections. So I don't have to pray for everyone in my life every day either. But having a little book there means I just work my way through it over again. It's kind of like having a reading plan, where if you don't know what you're reading that day, you may not read anything, or you may, just having some kind of a knowledge of what am I doing right now? Am I reading on a plan? Am I reading through the Gospels? What's my goal? And not trying to give too much time to it either, because that's a recipe for failure. So
I think that's great.
Yeah.
yeah.
When I read that part about prayer, I just thought the encouragement was don't let the lady know exactly when she's going to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that she doesn't know quite when the prayer time starts and when it ends, which I thought was so, it's true.
Right.
It can feel so fluid. Have I said them? Has it happened? And
Yes.
then if you just say something and you don't feel anything, it's well, did I pray? Did I connect with God? Because you don't have any feelings. I said the words, I sat and listened. Did I pray?
Yeah.
And I had all those same thoughts too. And I just thought, wow, it is, you do kind of romanticize it in my mind. I was thinking for a while, oh man, the best journal times I have with God. I have my journal, I write my prayers, I have my Bible out, and it's uninterrupted. No one's in the house. We have
yes. Oh yeah.
people in the house.
So in other words, during times in life that are totally not normal.
Yeah.
Like when I went on a retreat, or the house was empty for some reason. Yeah.
This scenario that's never going to happen, so you don't end up praying because you feel like you can't do it right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just know when I moved.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
When I moved out to this little church, they had been doing this prayer meeting on Wednesday nights for 35 years before I showed up here, and I hated going to these prayer meetings because you end up in a group, break down the big group to small groups of 3 women. And I hated it because, I'm a new Christian. I feel like an idiot trying to pray in front of other people. It's scary, And every Wednesday night I would feel like I'm about to get a fever. I'm about to get sick, I'm pretty sure, about 2 hours before prayer meeting, which now I think I've kind of come to the conclusion there may have been some active spiritual warfare around the Wednesday night prayer meetings, which again is not something I'm real comfortable just assuming, but looking at the pattern, I feel like that's what was happening. So that is where I learned to pray, though, like showing up to pray with seasoned older women. You learn how to pray because you're kind of learning by watching, but also hearing them describe what does their home prayer life look like, and realizing, oh, it's not fancy, it's very simple, and it doesn't have to mean that you're going to be on a spiritual high every morning, at 6 a.m. So, but what was I talking over that you were saying earlier?
Nothing. I was just going to say that was freeing and encouraging to hear, to kind of put down that unrealistic expectation and just pray. Know when you're going to pray and do it. And I just think about your mom and my mom, and I'm picturing both of their like notebooks. Your mom just has like blank paper, and my mom has these composition notebooks of all the prayer requests, all the people that they're praying for on a regular basis. And it's just simple, and they do it. And I've seen over the years their prayers be so fruitful, which is also encouraging too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know if this is true, but I do feel like that might be a maturity age thing, just where you reach a certain age where you suddenly realize I am never going to pray for the people I intend to pray for if I don't get a notebook, or get some kind of a little system like that, which is why you might see, I feel like I see older women doing that more than the younger women. So, yeah, I feel like it's something at some point you just recognize, oh, the reason why this isn't happening is because I've never had a system of any kind, and I should probably do that,
Are you working on anything else? The upcoming project you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I have been working on stuff to do with marriage. I have this, well, it's kind of a long story from this past year, but basically I just got led off on a journey where after this one particular interview, I had a lot of women messaging me about marriage stuff, and I did have specific things to say that were just like practical. Things that I've been taught, that the Lord's been showing me and teaching me in the last 5 or 6 years about how to talk to a man so that he feels respected and you're inviting him to lead you, and just super practical stuff for women who are like, I believe on paper in submission and the dance of that marriage structure, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know what it sounds like. So that I'm working on a very short, I think it'll be turning into a book probably in the next couple of years. There's a video course that I have out right now. If you find me on Instagram, you can find a link to that, because that's what I got on Instagram to talk about, was marriage. So yeah, that's probably what's next.
That's great.
That's exciting.
We'll link to your Instagram and to that link if we can find it.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And to the book, of course. I think everybody should read this. As soon as I read it, I just passed it along and forced every other woman I knew to read it, and Luke to hear about it ad nauseum. So thank you for writing it. It's been a blessing to me in a major way. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, I've enjoyed it too.
Have you ever seen this? This is one of the truth tracts that we make. And these are made to remind Christians that once we're saved by grace through faith, Jesus, Yeshua, called us to do and teach the lifestyle instructions of God, or Yah, His Torah, which defines sin, showing us right from wrong. In all of our statements in these, we put verses, as you can see. And this one is made, pardon my disgusting hands, I work on a farm, a hobby farm. This one is made to give out to people who are wishing you Merry Christmas and explain why you're not celebrating it. Let's explain kind of the pagan origins. You see, we're going back to Stonehenge here in this part, just to talk about the winter solstice and how it's always been celebrated. We talk about all this history and more in this. Besides this one, there's 4 other truth tracts that we've written so far, And all of them are meant to wake people up to the Torah and the fact that these forgotten laws are relevant and beneficial to our lives. So if that's interesting to you, go to thewaydoc.com and go check out Truth Tracts.